Have you tried stamping with water? How about stenciling? Whether you have or you haven't tried this oldie but goodie technique, I hope today's video is going to inspire you. I'll show you step by step how I created these 3 card projects featuring Altenew's Fine Mister water sprayer. I hope you'll be inspired and have some fun. Hi guys, it's Jenny. Welcome back to another stylish card making techniques with Jenny. Today I'm featuring this little guy. It's the Fine Mister, or Mr. Fine, complete with his little bow tie. I love this. It sprays a super fine mist of water and the well is really big, so you don't have to keep going back and refilling it when you're creating and having a long crafting session. I'm going to feature it on all 3 cards today, and all of my cards are going to start off with a heavily inked background. So I'm using dark colored ink for this technique. I find that works the best. You can try any color of ink you like, but my preference is for the darker ink because you get more of a contrast. And I'm going to use my large ink blending tool and fully ink blend that panel of Nina Solar White 80-pound cardstock. Once that's fully inked, I'm going to overlay my stencil of choice. This is the woven stencil over the top and secure it in place with some satin masking tape. And once that's secured in place, I'm going to grab Mr. Fine, my Fine Mister, and add maybe 2 or 3 mists of water over the top. Not too many, you don't want the water to run and seep under the stencil, but just enough so that you get a good layer. And before I lift up that stencil, I'm going to overlay with a paper towel just to pick up the excess that's on top of that stencil so it doesn't drip off when I remove the stencil. I'm then going to carefully peel back the stencil without shifting it, and ta-da! It's amazing. You see why I want to use dark ink. So I'm using Rhodolite here, which is one of the newer ink releases, and you can speed up the drying time if you want with a heat tool. And to finish off this card, I'm going to keep this pretty masculine. It's a dark coloured ink and a sort of pretty neutral stencil. So I thought, why not go with splatters? I'm adding some pure white ink spray, some orange cream metallic ink spray, because I don't think I've ever used this colour on a card, and I thought it would just be a really nice pop of colour for a birthday card for a guy or a gal. And also some antique gold metallic ink spray. So all of those colours together worked really well with that Rhodolite. And isn't it cool how that water just lifts up the ink and it gives you that sort of second colour and perfectly creates that stenciled background. For my sentiment, I'm using the Just a Number die. This has a coordinating stamp set with lots of sentiments in it, but I'm just featuring the die today. It's a shadow outline, which I've die cut from vellum, and I'm layering over the top with jet black cardstock. I did do a couple of layers there with some glue, and then I'm going to mount it on some thin strips of foam tape right into the center and just leave it at that, pop it onto a note card. Change up the stencil, florals, other patterns, change up the colors. It's a super versatile technique and you can create tons and tons of backgrounds for super fast cards if you so desire. Now for my second card, I'm going to be using water on a stamp, so real water stamping. I'm featuring the Courageous You stamp set. This has a gigantic floral image in it, which is not quite small enough to fit on an A2 size card, but I'm going to stamp it a couple of times to create a background. I've inked up my card panel with Tanzanite, which is a stunning deep blue colour. And then I've arranged my stamp in my Misty, given it a spritz 2 or 3 times with the Fine Mister, and then I'm going to stamp it down onto that inked up panel. And I pushed it down a few times. I prefer to sort of hold it there just to make sure that water reaches the cardstock and starts soaking in. And then I'm re-stamping. I have dried off my stamp first just to make sure I don't get some accidental stamping happening. And I'm going to spritz it one more time. You can see I'm adding 2, 3, 4 good spritzes. This is really fine mist. If you use a different mister, maybe with bigger droplets, it makes it a little less easier to control and get those nice fine lines. If you push down harder or add more water, those lines will be thicker. I thought my finished background looked a little bit like sort of batik or stamped fabric, so I'm leaning into that look, and I'm using this cross-stitch canvas background cover die to create sort of a a cross-stitch canvas look with that sort of stamped fabric, faux fabric, and I thought it really just came out great. I love this look and those sort of fine florals in the background. To embellish it, I'm using Floral lace dye, which is a gigantic dye. It gives this really gorgeous look of lace. You know, we're keeping the fabric theme here, and I've die cut it from vellum backed with double-sided adhesive before I ran it through my die cutting machine. And then I'm going to overlay this in a few places. You'll see I only die cut a small part of that die because I wanted to fit it onto my A2 size card. I'm going to trim off the excess and then reapply. If you find that some places it doesn't stick, and this can happen with this die, this cover die, and also some of the debossing dies, just the texture of the cardstock, I recommend grabbing your bone folder and just rubbing it gently over the places where you want it to adhere, and it will stick perfectly. I left a few little pieces of that floral lace die cut sticking up just for some interest and dimension, just the ends of the leaves and that little squiggly bit at the top. Just thought that was a fun look, but you can adhere it down completely if you want to. And then I've grabbed an old paintbrush and I'm adding some splatters of pure white ink spray. You'll see where it hits that inked background, it soaks up some of that ink, so it looks almost like light blue, which is kind of fun. If you really want pure white, you can grab some acrylic paint and that would do the trick. My sentiment is heat embossed in pure white crisp embossing powder, and that is the sentiment from the Courageous You stamp set again on jet black cardstock. And then to finish, I'm adding a few satin white sequins here and there and backed it onto a white note card. And that finishes my second project. Really like the look of this. Kind of shabby chic with that fabric background, don't you think? Love it. So for my third, I wasn't going to do a third, but I thought I'll try this, I'll experiment, see if it works. I'm using the Cheerful Bloom 3D embossing folder, and I wanted to see if I could dry emboss with water, just to test it really, and I really liked how it came out. It's actually my favourite card of all of the three projects today. My cardstock is inked up with Andromeda, which is a beautifully deep purple ink. And I've spritzed, if you couldn't quite see off camera, with my Fine Mister 2 or 3 times on the left-hand side of the embossing folder. And I wiped off the right-hand side before placing down my cardstock and ran it through my die cutting machine. And it doesn't quite give an outline, but it lightens all of those sort of upper layers of petals, almost like highlights. And it added almost like a speckled look in the background, a bit like a night sky. Given I was using the Andromeda ink, I thought that was quite cool. And I wanted to enhance it a little bit, so I'm just going to gently run Enchanted Gold pigment ink over the top. Really gently, I'm keeping that ink pad flat and just gently rubbing it over the top, letting those tops of the embossing catch the gold ink, and it just gently sort of raises them up and sort of gives them a bit more definition. And doesn't that look gorgeous? I love how this turned out. I'm going to try this on tons more backgrounds, see what happens. So we've just done a bit of water stamping. I figured why not try and do water stamping of the sentiment itself. And I think it kind of worked. It did kind of work. I'm using a slightly, probably too fine a sentiment. It did work, but I would recommend using a thicker, more solid sentiment for this technique. So I'm going to add that stamp from the Courageous You stamp set down in the bottom left corner, give it a couple of spritzes, maybe was a little heavy-handed with the water there because it's a smaller stamp, you need less water, and then pressed it down into that ink, and you can see as it dries, and it's still a little damp here, you really do get, it's very legible, you can read it, but I did decide to enhance it just a little bit, coming back in with that Enchanted Gold pigment ink. And I stamped this down maybe 2 or 3 times just to build up the colour. I only show you it once on camera, but it did it 2 or 3 times just to enhance it. And I thought that looked really cool. It's super easy to read. It's a little fuzzy on the video camera because it wasn't focusing. But I really like how that sentiment came out. Kept it one layer as well. So I'm going to grab my Enchanted Gold ink pad one more time and run it round, sort of pushing down onto those edges and give it an outline just to sort of make it look a little bit more finished. And I'm just going to leave it at that. No embellishments, nothing. Just adhere it to a white note card. Great for mailing a 1-layer card as well. That finishes all 3 projects today. I hope I've inspired you to grab that Fine Mister and get stenciling, stamping, and embossing. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks. Bye!
Hello crafters, Jen here. For more tips, techniques, tutorials, and to discover which paper crafting products are right for you, subscribe to Altenew's YouTube channel. Make sure to hit the notification bell so you don't miss any videos. Thanks for watching.